Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from FantasyFootballScout.co.uk. My name is David and today we're going to have a look at my FPL team, how it got on in Game Week 2 and some of the issues that I'm thinking about solving for Game Week 3. I've got myself 2 free transfers like many others and there's lots of potential fires that need extinguishing. So lots to talk about and also I'm going to be having a look at some of the tables in the members area that help inform some of those decisions for my team on a week-to-week basis. So I'll be sharing those with you guys. Of course, a reminder that if you want full access to those, the Fantasy Football Scout membership is what's going to help you get that, and you can still save some money on those preseason prices. So make sure you sort that out before the Game Week 3 deadline. We're back to a usual Friday night deadline time of 6:30 this time, so you've got an extra 15 minutes to use it wisely. But yes, my Game Week 2 team, how did it get on? Well, of course, like many of you will know, I was one of those who decided to give the Salah captaincy in Game Week 2 a bit of a go, and I have to say, I feel a little bit fortunate in the way that it did technically work, even if it wasn't necessarily as explosive as I would like. Just the 5 points for Salah, because of course he did score, but he did miss that penalty as well, which is his third missed penalty in the last 6 months, which does make me a little bit nervous about what it means for him going forward. But certainly the fact that Haaland only got 2 points against Newcastle has bailed me out in many ways. When the full-time whistle went at Anfield on Saturday, I was very, very nervous that the game was going to end very badly for me. Wasn't actually able to watch the Man City game on Saturday night, and all I was able to do in the end was just check in on the score at full time, and was pleasantly relieved. So that all helped. Not in necessarily a big way, but that helped certainly push up about 100k places. So I'm 366,000 after 2 game weeks, which I'm quite happy with, to be honest, because we're all very concertinaed, all close together at the start of the campaign. You know, you're never more than about 2 or 3 points off a different rank bracket of 100,000s, and so being 366,000 at this stage, I'm pretty happy with. Another couple of good game weeks, and I'd like to find myself maybe in the top 100k by about game week 4 or 5. That's kind of my aim, and then to keep pushing on from there. But yeah, things are still going relatively well, which is nice. I'll run through the team for the benefit of the podcast listeners outside of that Salah captaincy. So Turner in goal, Cash, Estupiñán, Chilwell is the back three, Rashford and Burmo, Diaby, Salah and Saka is the midfield, and then Pedro and Haaland as the strikers. So yeah, 56 points in total. There were some things in the team that could have gone better. There were some things in the team that I'm quite happy with how they came off. Now, the biggest decision that I had going into Game Week 2, the one that was the hardest one, I think, to make in the end, was Turner versus Flecken, and I obviously have got this one wrong because Flecken did keep a clean sheet against Fulham, so 6 points there. Turner actually had a good game against Sheffield United, and arguably you could say that the goal that Sheffield United scored, was nobody would have stopped it. But I think I still feel like I was maybe punished for not putting full faith in Flecken after bigging him up so much throughout the summer, and of course Brentford defence as well. Fulham, in the way that they played against Everton, where they just had 2 shots on target, I realise in hindsight, but it's not even hindsight, because I knew this before the Game Week 2 deadline. Fulham had 2 shots on target against Everton in Game Week 1. That should have been enough to tell me that Brentford were more than capable of keeping a clean sheet there. And of course, Brentford defence, in the time that we've been investing in them from an FPL perspective, has just been more reliable than the Forest one. And so I accept that was a mistake. I realise what I've done wrong now. I've just not put enough faith in something that I had been bigging up over the summer and going into Game Week 1 as well. And so I think probably most weeks I'm going to be starting Flecken, and we'll have a look at the fixtures in a minute. There's not going to be too many times when I feel like I don't want to start Flecken anymore, if I'm honest, after what's happened this weekend. So a bit frustrated there, but it's only cost me 4 points, and at this stage of the season, losing 4 points is not the end of the world, because you can easily make them up at another stage. And as I said, we're all concertinaed close together, and so you only need a couple of extra points swing in the other direction on next game week, and you can maybe climb 50k places at this particular point in time. And so if there's anybody out there who's chosen the wrong goalie this week, there can't have been too many people that chose the wrong goalie, and the substitute goalie got ridiculous amounts of points, unless it was Areola. But the point is, with some of these 50-50s, it's you've really got to feel out your decision-making process. And whilst it was a mistake to bench Flecken, maybe I just hadn't seen enough of Brentford's defence with him in as well. So I'm going to be kind to myself. I'm not going to beat myself up too much about that one. It hasn't cost me all that much in the grand scheme of things, and I'd encourage other people to feel the same way if they've done that with their goalkeeper. Now, the other decision that I had to make was, of course, what to do with Gabriel, and I'm happy with the decision I came here. Although I did actually also get something something else wrong, which we'll come on to in a minute. Gabriel, a lot of people were thinking about selling him. Some people were thinking, I'll start him just in case he does play, because, clean sheet against Crystal Palace, so you wouldn't be too shocked if one happened there, etc., etc. I wasn't interested in that. I felt he was too much of a risk. I famously, in a lot of podcasts last week, said I think Palace will score, and of course they didn't. So apologies to everybody who decided to go with my view there. I mean, I'm not necessarily incredibly shocked that Arsenal kept a clean sheet, because of course they are a good side. I just felt that it wasn't probable. But I was still wrong. Hold my hands up and say I was wrong. Arsenal got the clean sheet, so well done to anybody who had Saliba or anyone else in the Arsenal defence, perhaps Ramsdale or something. But Gabriel was still benching. Gabriel, I still think, was the right decision, because of course he didn't start the game, only came on for that 1 point cameo, and so had I started him over Cash, who I felt had a better chance of a clean sheet and considerably better chance of starting, then that really would have been a mistake I probably would have been annoyed with myself about, because I did really believe that Villa had a higher chance of a clean sheet, and obviously they kept one, which is good, and then Cash got me 6 points and Gabriel got me just the one on my bench, so I'm happy with how that decision transpired. Estupiñán continues to just be an absolute auto pick. He just looks absolutely on fire in terms of offensive potential, goal assists, all that. And at some point, Brighton will keep a clean sheet, I'm sure, and then his score's going to be even higher. Chilwell at Chelsea. I mean, I think the West Ham result shows that there is still a little bit of work to do at Chelsea, so I'm glad that result's happened, because I think it will probably temper my enthusiasm for my free transfers this week, because as I said at the top, I rolled my transfers, so I've got 2 free transfers for Gameweek 3, and what I do with them, I had initially been thinking, yep, let's rip the team up, let's get involved in Spurs and Chelsea, and I'm a bit less inclined to do that now, which actually I think, and I'll talk about that in a minute, might be beneficial. So then in the midfield, Mbeumo is obviously the centrepiece of that midfield with 16 points. Diaby, Saka and Rashford all blanked, but I'm not too worried about Diaby and Saka, and I'll show you my bust team in a minute. Rashford is potentially on the chopping block, but I may give him one more week against Nottingham Forest, because I think it's quite a nice fixture. As for what to do with Salah, yeah, I will admit that what I've seen of him so far, I feel like he is a little bit short of being able to get the points that I wanted from him, but not in a way where I feel like he's not playing well enough to get that. So I think I will probably hold him for a little while as well and take things easy. Joao Pedro, he's been talked about a lot, of course, because he didn't start game week 2, came on and got booked, so 0 points for him. But I do sort of suspect that because there's a lot of rotation going on at Brighton, maybe you could argue that he's had his rest and that maybe he's going to come back into the squad for Game Week 3 if De Zerbi is interested in constantly tinkering that team, which we have seen him do in the past. So I'm not too worried there. And so for that reason, I will put my current bus team on the screen and I'll read that off for the benefit of the podcast listeners. So Flecken back in goal against Crystal Palace. Cash, Estupiñán, Chilwell still the back 3. Rashford and Mbeumo, Diaby, Salah, Saka as the midfield 5, Joao Pedro and Haaland up front. Turner back on the bench away at Man United seems sensible. Then Anderson as my first sub, then Gabriel as the second sub, and Archer as the third sub. So that's what it's looking like at the moment. So I haven't made any transfers yet. I don't want to make any transfers until much later in the week when I've had a real chance to think about all of the things I could do. And so I'm just going to list off a couple of those ideas that I've been having at the moment. So the first one, of course, is could potentially sell Gabriel. He's now gone down to 4.9, so my options there are limited. But when I look at the 3 defenders that I've got in my team for Game Week 3, very happy starting Cash away at Burnley. Very happy, obviously, starting Estupiñán at home to West Ham and Chilwell at home to Luton. So there's not an immediate rush for me to go out and get myself a defender at the same price point as Gabriel. For now, I may have a look at potentially getting Rico Henry because he's looking very good. Brentford defence, obviously, I'm interested in it because I've got Flecken, and having the opportunity to sometimes, not always, double up on that defence could be quite useful, and he could factor into a nice little rotation with Cash, Anderson, and then Henry. That's something that I'm thinking about because I feel like in Chilwell and Estupiñán, I've got my 2 more expensive defenders that I need. I'm not interested in a third premium. I would rather my third defender was a budget option so I could rotate. That seems to be working so far. I've only had 2 game weeks, of course, and Gabriel didn't get me anything. Well, he got me 1 point in game week 1, but already that rotation of, okay, don't fancy my Arsenal defender this week, so I'll bring in my Aston Villa one. It's paid off already. He got 6 points, so I'm happy with the rotation. It's working so far. Fingers crossed it will keep working, and throwing an additional defender in there, I'm relatively happy with. Now, the other area of the team that could change, as I've said on General's orders yesterday, there was the possibility that what I could do is use both my free transfers to move Rashford to, say, a Maddison, and then maybe that would allow me to do a Joao Pedro up to a Jackson or something like that. They're things that I have been thinking about. But as I've sort of allowed those things to mull over in my mind, a couple of things have popped up. Obviously, there's this potential injury. I think it has been reported as an injury to Maddison, but what we don't know is the severity of it. So that's at the back of my mind. And so that would even, in my head, sort of count potentially against Richarlison as well, because if Maddison's not going to play, then, of course, Spurs are going to lose a bit of creativity and a bit of service to those forward players. Outside of that, it's hard to know exactly where to go with that particular transfer, because I'm seeing a lot of love for Foden, but he hasn't delivered yet. So I'm not saying he's someone I'm desperate to get to. A lot of people are using their Man United midfielder to get to Mbeumo, but I've already got him, so there's no stress from me there. Of course, the Brighton midfielders have done well at the start of the season, so that's March and Mitoma. But bearing in mind that I still feel like there's potentially one more week out of Joao Pedro, again, I'm not in any kind of immediate rush, especially as the gap in price between Rashford and those Brighton midfielders, even if there's a couple of extra price point rises, I can still get to them. Because what this all comes down to, I've already sort of touched on Pedro. I think that he could start against West Ham. We'll see what the press conferences say, and we'll go from there. What this all comes down to is limited resources that I have is transfers. And so even if I think that Mitoma or a Jackson is going to score more points than Rashford or Pedro this week, do I think that the gap there is enough? Do I think that the differential in points, let's say I think Rashford maybe is roughly going to get 7 points against Forest, but I think that Mitoma is going to get like 12 points against West Ham. Is spending a transfer worth buying myself an extra 5 points? Versus if I hold on to some of my transfers continually and then maybe spend one and keep rolling that second transfer until such a time that I feel that I've had enough data to actually restructure my team. Because if I'm going to spend lots of transfers in one fell swoop, it's going to involve a lot of changes. And there's a possibility that maybe I can do that in a more informed way if I just spend one transfer. And so, bearing in mind that Gabriel seems to be the one that everyone's getting rid of, I'm not unhappy with Rashford and Joao Pedro starting for game week 3 for me. Maybe I just use my transfer to shore up my bench in terms of what I can do on defensive rotations from one week to the next, for example. So that seems, to be honest, like the most likely route I'm going to go down. But, of course, it is going to depend on a few of other factors. Need to find out a bit more on Joao Pedro, and I need to really have a think about Rashford. I mean, he's not started the season too well, but he would, if I was to move him out after 2 game weeks, having not seen that much from him that I'm impressed with, he wouldn't be the first player I did that after 2 game weeks who then punished me game week 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And the biggest example of that was the Vardy season where he was fantastic. It was the 9-0 season. I had him from the start of the season. He had 1 shot in the first 2 matches, so I thought, okay, maybe I've misjudged this in thinking he was worth having from the start of the season. So I got rid of him, and then after that, he immediately started banging. It took me a couple of weeks to erode the stubbornness to bring him back, and it was after the 9-0 win over Southampton that I did it. So I know that these players can punish me if I make big decisions after 2 game weeks. So I just think a home game against Forest, maybe I'm going to give him a go. We're going to have a look at some numbers in a minute, but that's in my mind, to just still be relatively calm, because I don't think my team is bad. Most of the fixtures that my players have are good, and therefore if I've got players with good fixtures, I don't like to sell them, because it's about what I've got in terms of what other people have got that I have to get rid of. If the cost of moving towards a player that everybody else has got is to spend a precious transfer on someone who I still think has got a good match this week, I'd much rather use that transfer in an effective way when I get rid of a guy who I'm completely convinced is useless with a terrible fixture, to replace him with someone who's in good form and got a good fixture. That is really where I'd like to spend the 2 transfers if I can. So that's kind of the position that I'm in at the moment. Of course, the captain's armband is very very simply going to end back up on Haaland because I think he's got the best fixture this week. But speaking of fixtures, I'm going to stick the fixture ticker on the screen because I always like to track the season ticker as it progresses through the campaign, and you're always going to see teams fluctuate up and down in terms of that fixture difficulty. The top 6 teams at the moment, Chelsea still top. So yeah, fully appreciate that maybe I could get involved in a Chelsea asset somewhere, especially with Luton and Forest coming up next. Again, I'll have to have a think about that, comparing them with what options I've got available in my team. As I said, if it looks like Pedro is not going to play Game Week 3, then maybe he makes way for a Jackson, and then I'm going to have to move Rashford to someone else in order to facilitate that, because I do appreciate Chelsea's fixtures are good. Luton and Everton are second and third, but I'm not seeing enough from them in terms of form to justify a heavy investment. Man City's fixtures also looking nice as well, so it's worth saying that John Stones is on my mind at some point. I know that he's not going to be around until after the international break, but I'm eyeing up his price coming down and thinking, there's some good fixtures for them coming up. Maybe I'll get him after that international break. And Spurs as well. They have got some nice fixtures: Bournemouth, Burnley, Sheffield United, Arsenal, Liverpool, and Luton. And then Man United still in the top 6 here for fixture difficulty. Yeah, they've got Arsenal away next time, and then Brighton at home Game Week 5. So I feel more comfortable selling Rashford for Game Week 4 than I do for Game Week 3, especially as it's at home, and that's where he gets a lot of his returns. So that's still a reminder that of all the attacking players, United's fixtures, they're still doing well on the season ticker, which makes it difficult for me to sell them, I think. Then the teams that have some nastier fixtures: West Ham, Sheffield United and Forest are the bottom 3, but Brighton continuing to plummet down the season ticker. They were a lot higher when they had their 2 favourable matches in Game Weeks 1 and 2. Of course, as the Newcastle and Man United game, and of course the Liverpool game in Game Week 8 as well, becomes closer to the present day, that does suck them down to the bottom of the season ticker. And so as I said, Pedro may stay this week, but he may have to leave after that point. And it also is another reason why I'm not too fussed about breaking my team or spending all of my free transfers to bring in Brighton midfielders in a world where their fixtures are going to stiffen up very soon. So let's have just a quick look at some of the tables that I like to look at in the members area each week to see, just inform some decisions. One of the first things I like to look at is which team is conceding the most big chances, so we can identify those whipping boys for when we have captaincy decisions or transfer decisions to make. Aston Villa are actually still bottom of this table. They're joint bottom with Fulham with 9 big chances conceded, but the vast majority of those came in that Newcastle game where they lost Mings in the first half, and of course they've kept that clean sheet against Everton. So I'm not too concerned about Villa defence moving forward. I just think that for a little while their numbers are going to be a bit skewed by that Newcastle game, and I'm happy to sort of use that as mitigating circumstances for making some decisions there. Fulham, in terms of the games they've played so far, they've played against Everton and against Brentford, and for them to be bottom of the league or joint bottom of the league for big chances conceded, that tells me that is a defence that is going to concede a lot of shots this season. Some people are a bit nervous about their Arsenal midfielders, for example, like Saka off the penalties, and have I got the wrong one? Don't sell your Arsenal midfielders this week, to be honest, because there's a high chance that they're going to get something against this Fulham defence. The Liverpool defence still isn't looking particularly tidy, 8 big chances conceded, so I think that's largely going to keep people away from investing in Trent, but I think we kind of guessed that already. Everton, Spurs and Wolves all on 7 big chances conceded each, and probably the 2 more pertinent ones of these are probably Everton and Tottenham, because of course, a lot of Pickford owners out there looking at how they've started the season, conceding that number of big chances against Fulham and Aston Villa. When they come up against some even bigger teams, I think that's going to be quite painful for them. So Pickford owners may be experiencing a bit of regret at this stage of the season. I think that a switch to Flecken, if you can do it at some point, might be worth doing, just because this Everton defence is still giving up lots of opportunities. And then the Spurs one as well, which is not a surprise because we know that this is the way that Postecoglou likes to play, attacking football that is going to give up lots of chances at the other end. So that might come into people's minds when they're thinking about a Porro or an Udogie or something like that. The most creative players so far, Mitoma and Foden are top of the league for key passes so far. And what's interesting about Mitoma is that he wasn't really an assist maker last season. He was more of a goal threat, but he is top of the league for key passes after 2 games with 20 touches in the penalty box, which is very, very exciting. We've got Maddison, Eze, Estupiñán, Gross and Alvarez joint second for 8 key passes. So, there's a few players in there who are on my watch list potentially for the future. Estupiñán top of the league for big chances created. And a little honourable mention for for Fernandes, who there wasn't enough room for him to fit onto this. 7 key passes, 2 big chances created, so he's joint second for big chances created so far. Estupiñán is the only one to have created more than him, and Fernandes also offering some good XGI as well so far. So if you're nervous about having him in your team, home against Forest, decent stats so far, just hasn't delivered on them so far. If I had Fernandes, I would be holding him. Shots in the box then. Who's been the most persistent shooters so far? Well, we've had Visser and Edouard as the top 2, just ahead of Haaland there. And so Visser is obviously making himself look very attractive at the start of the campaign, just 6.1. And Brentford's fixtures continue to be relatively positive. Perhaps the 2 standouts here for decisions that people might need to make this week. Rashford has had 7 shots in the box so far. So he's actually 4th best for this stat. So with that in mind, it makes me feel like I should probably hold him against Forest when you consider what Forest were like away from home last season, when you consider that Rashford is usually very good at Old Trafford as well. It's not for lack of trying that he hasn't got his returns yet. 7 shots in the box I'm relatively happy with. And then of course the other one is Nicholas Jackson. He's had 6 shots in the box so far, so that is joint 4th best. There's a number of other players who are tied with him for that, but he's joint 5th best. There's only 4 players in the league after 2 games that have had more shots in the box than him. So his credentials don't look bad for game week 3, of course, playing Luton. You might have at the back of your mind, there's some unknowns related to him, of course, being new to the Premier League, but he's certainly hit the ground running in terms of attempting to score, which is important, and having the opportunity to shoot in the box, because sometimes we see new players come to the Premier League and not quite, it doesn't quite bounce right, you can't quite get their feet in such a way they can have an effort on goal, and he's had 6 so far, so that's worth noting. But in terms of the accuracy, unfortunately, neither Jackson nor Rashford have been able to trouble the top echelons for that stat so far. So decent number of shots in the box, but haven't necessarily been all that accurate. The most accurate shooter so far, or the player with the highest volume of shots on target so far, is Solly March with 6. We've had Visser and Mbeumo both joint second there with 5. Edouard, Haaland, Diaby, Mopé and Wilson all on 4. So they're the players that have managed the most shots on target so far. Diaby obviously in my team. I think if you've not got him, he's definitely worth having on your watch list at the very least. And in terms of Visser and Mbeumo, I mean, if you're wondering about their sustainability, well, the stats they're recording are very, very good. They're not just getting goals because they're being lucky or anything like that. Visser is one of the top shooters in the box. Then between Visser and Mbeumo, they're both doing very, very well for big chances, of course, and Mbeumo on the penalties as well. And only Solly March has more shots on target than the Brentford pair after 2 game weeks. So they are looking in good shape. All of that, of course, is from the members area, the FFScout members area. So if you want to be able to access the tables in a bit more interactivity, then do sign up for the membership. And so you can get full access to that. You don't have to listen to me extol the benefits of membership anymore. And so, yeah, make sure you get that sorted for Game Week 3, extra 15 minutes before the deadline this week. So plenty of time to sort it. But with that, I will leave you fine, folks, to the rest of your tinkering, and I will see you next time.